sold to the trembling girl in the back row for every last dime she owns. They called him the Beast of Blackwood, a feral alpha too dangerous to let live, too valuable to kill. I didn't buy him because I wanted a monster. I bought him because I had no choice. I emptied my bank account, sold my grandmother's ring, and walked into the devil's den with one goal: save him, get the answers, and get out. But the moment the chains fell off, I realized I hadn't bought a prisoner. I had just unleashed a king, and he didn't want my help. He wanted me. The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Isla Corvin pulled the hood of her oversized, thrifted jacket tighter against her face as she stepped out of the taxi. The neon sign above the warehouse door flickered with a pretentious, curling script. The Velvet Room. To the human eye, it was an exclusive underground club. To anyone with a drop of wolf blood, the scent rolling off the building was unmistakable. It smelled of fear, ozone, and old blood masked by expensive perfume. Isla clutched her bag to her chest. Inside was a cashier's check for $84,000. It was the payout from the life insurance policy her grandmother, Martha, had left her. It was supposed to be for college. It was supposed to be her ticket out of the dormant life, the purgatory of being born a werewolf who couldn't shift. Instead, she was about to blow it all on a rumor. "Invitation?" the bouncer grunted. He was a low-level enforcer, a bulky man named Bricks who smelled like wet dog and tobacco. Isla flashed the QR code on her cracked phone screen. She'd spent 3 months haunting dark web forums, trading secrets she picked up working as a janitor at the PAC council offices just to get this invite. "You look lost, little girl," Bricks sneered, but the scanner beeped green. He stepped aside. "Don't touch the merchandise. You break it, you buy it." Isla walked into the dark. The air inside was stiflingly hot. The room was set up like a theater, with plush red velvet seats occupied by the city's supernatural elite. There were women in silk gowns sipping champagne, and men in bespoke suits discussing the stock like they were cattle. Isla found a seat in the very back, trying to shrink into the shadows. She felt the heavy, predatory gazes of shifters sweeping over her. To them, she was nothing, a dormant, weak prey. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice boomed from the stage. Silas Vane stepped into the spotlight. He was a snake in a suit, the premier black market auctioneer on the West Coast. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Tonight we have a rare treat. A tragedy, really. But one man's tragedy is another man's investment." The curtain behind him rose. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Isla's breath hitched. It's him. Chained to a steel pillar in the center of the stage was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite and war. He was stripped to the waist, his skin a roadmap of scars and fresh bruises. Heavy silver collars, wolfsbane infused, were clamped around his neck, wrists and ankles. His head hung low, black hair matting over his eyes. Kalen Blackwood, the alpha of the Obsidian Ridge Pack. Rumors said he had gone rogue, slaughtered his own council, and vanished. But looking at the burns on his chest and the way his muscles trembled with forced restraint, Isla knew the rumors were lies. He hadn't vanished. He had been stolen. Isla needed him, not for his title and not for his body. She needed him because the night her brother, Toby, disappeared 2 years ago, the last text he sent was a photo of a tattoo, a specific geometric wolf head design, and that same design was currently inked onto Kalen Blackwood's left shoulder. "We start the bidding at 20,000, Silas announced, tapping his gavel. "Do I hear 20? 20! Shouted a man in the front row, a sleazy beta from a rival pack. 30! A woman's voice rang out. Isla's heart hammered against her ribs. She checked her bank balance app one last time. 84,320. That was her ceiling. If he went for a penny more, she, and the truth about her brother, were dead in the water. 40,000. 50. The price was climbing too fast. Kalen lifted his head slowly. Even from the back of the room, Isla felt the impact of his gaze. His eyes were a startling, electric amber. They weren't the eyes of a broken animal. They were the eyes of a predator waiting for the cage to rust. He scanned the crowd, hate radiating off him in waves hot enough to burn. When his eyes landed on the back row, on Isla, he paused. She froze. Did he know? Could he smell her dormant scent, the scent of nothingness amongst the perfumes? 70,000, a deep voice drawled from a private balcony. The room went silent. It was deeply taboo to bid against the Vane family, but money was money. 70,000 going once. Silas grinned. Isla's hands shook. This was insane. She was going to be homeless. She was going to be destitute. 80,000! Isla screamed, her voice cracking. Heads whipped around. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with judgment. Who was this girl in the thrift store hoodie, outbidding the elite? Silas squinted into the darkness. 80,000 from the spirited young lady in the back. Do I hear 85? The man on the balcony laughed, a cruel, dry sound. She can have him. He looks half dead anyway. I don't buy damaged goods. 80,000 going once, Silas chanted, speeding up, clearly annoyed that the bidding had stalled. Twice! Isla stopped breathing. She squeezed her eyes shut. Please let this be enough. Sold! The gavel slammed down like a gunshot. Isla collapsed back into her seat, exhaling a breath she felt she'd been holding for 2 years. She had done it. She owned an alpha. Now she just had to figure out how to survive him. The backstage holding area of the Velvet Room smelled worse than the front. It smelled of bleach and copper. Payment processed, the clerk said, looking at Isla with open disdain. She handed over the receipt. It felt flimsy, a small piece of paper in exchange for a human life. You have transport. I have a car out back, Isla lied. She had a bus pass. Here's the remote for the shock collar, the clerk said, tossing a small black device onto the counter. Don't lose it. He's drugged with wolfsbane and ketamine, but he's an alpha. If he wakes up fully, he'll rip your throat out before you can say sit. Isla stared at the device. She shoved it into her pocket, her fingers brushing against the cold plastic. I want him unchained, now. Suit yourself. 2 guards led her down a concrete hallway to cell 4. They buzzed the door open. Kalen was on his knees, breathing heavily. They had removed the chains from the pillar, but his hands were still cuffed behind his back with silver. The collar around his neck hummed with a low electric charge. Up, mutt! One guard kicked Kalen in the ribs. Kalen didn't flinch. He just turned his head, spitting a mouthful of blood onto the guard's polished boot. The guard raised his baton to strike, but Isla stepped forward. Stop! She yelled, surprising herself with the ferocity in her voice. He's mine. You don't touch my property. The guard paused, looking at Isla, then at the receipt in her hand. He sneered, wiping his boot on Kalen's leg. Good luck, sweetheart. You're gonna need it. The guards uncuffed his hands, shoved Kalen toward her, and slammed the cell door shut, leaving them alone in the corridor. For a long moment, there was silence. Kalen slowly straightened up. He towered over her. He had to be 6'4", a wall of muscle and heat. Up close, the damage was worse. The silver burns on his wrists were weeping. His skin was pale from the poison, but the power rolling off him was suffocating. He took a step toward her. Isla stepped back, her back hitting the cold concrete wall. "So," Kalen rasped. His voice was like grinding gravel. It sent a shiver down Isla's spine that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with biology. "You're the one who spent 80 grand on a dead man." Isla tried to keep her voice steady. "You're not dead yet." "Give it an hour," he muttered, swaying slightly. The drugs were fighting his metabolism. He looked down at her, his amber eyes narrowing. He leaned in close, sniffing her neck. Isla froze. Being sniffed by a shifter was intimate, invasive. "You smell like..." "Nothing," he whispered, puzzled. "Dormant. Weak." "I'm the one with the key to the exit," Isla snapped, holding up the keycard she'd been given. "So I suggest you be nice." Kalen laughed, a dark, humorless sound. "You think you bought a pet, girl? You think that collar makes you my master?" "I don't want to be your master," Isla said, lowering her voice. "I want to know about the tattoo on your shoulder. The geometric wolf. I want to know where you got it." Kalen's expression changed instantly. The arrogance vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp calculation. He looked at the tattoo, then back at her. "Who are you?" "Isla Corvin." "Corvin," he tested the name. "Never heard of you." "My brother knew you, or he knew your pack. Toby Corvin." Kalen's eyes flickered. A reaction. It was small, but it was there. He knew the name. Before he could answer, the heavy steel door at the end of the corridor exploded inward. Debris and dust filled the air. An alarm began to blare, a high-pitched screech that made Isla cover her ears. "Vane isn't known for his refund policy," Kalen growled, his body instantly shifting into a combat stance despite his injuries. "But it seems someone else wants me tonight." 3 men in tactical gear burst through the smoke. They weren't security, they were assassins, and they were holding automatic rifles loaded with silver bullets. "Get down!" Kalen roared. He didn't run away from her. He didn't use her as a shield. He moved in front of her. Despite the silver in his veins, despite the collar, he launched himself at the first gunman with a speed that blurred the air. He tore the rifle from the man's hands and swung it like a club, shattering the attacker's helmet. "Run!" Kalen shouted at her over his shoulder. "I'm not leaving you!" Isla yelled back, grabbing his arm. "I paid for you, you giant idiot!" Kalen looked at her, bemused amidst the chaos. "You are undeniably the stupidest investment I've ever seen." He grabbed her hand. His grip was iron-hot. "Fine. We go together." They sprinted toward the loading dock, bullets pinging off the pipes around them. They burst out into the rainy Seattle night, the cold air hitting them like a slap. "My car!" Isla panicked. "I don't have a car." "Then we improvise," Kalen growled. A delivery truck was idling near the gate. Kalen ripped the driver's side door open, threw the terrified driver out onto the pavement, and shoved Isla into the passenger seat. He jumped in, hot-wired the ignition with a brutal twist of wires under the dash, and slammed on the gas. The truck roared, smashing through the wooden gate of the alleyway. Isla was thrown back against the seat, her heart pounding in her throat. She looked at Kalen. He was driving with one hand, the other clutching his side, where a fresh bullet wound was bleeding dark, black blood. "You're hit," she whispered. "Silver," he gritted out, his face pale. "It inhibits healing, and with the wolfsbane in my system, I can't shift to push it out." He turned to look at her, the truck swerving slightly on the wet asphalt. His eyes were glazing over. "I need energy, Isla," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, guttural frequency. "I'm running on fumes. If I pass out, we crash. If we crash, Vane's men catch us, and they will kill you just for standing next to me." "What do you need?" Isla asked, rummaging through her bag for a first aid kit that wasn't there. "Sugar? Caffeine?" "No," Kalen growled. He reached out, his hand gripping the back of her neck. His skin was burning. I need connection. I need to ground myself. I need to claim something. Isla's eyes widened. Claim? You mean a mate bond? We just met, and I'm dormant. Not a mate bond, he panted, fighting to keep his eyes open. A tactical claim, a temporary tether. I need to borrow your life force to burn the silver out. Just for a minute. Is that safe? For me? Yes, Kalen said, his eyes flashing wolf gold. For you? It's going to hurt. He didn't wait for permission. He couldn't. The truck drifted toward a concrete barrier. Kalen slammed the brakes, drifting the truck into a dark side street under a bridge. He killed the engine. He turned to her, filling the small cab with his massive presence. Don't fight it, Isla. If you fight it, it breaks your mind. Kalen, wait. He leaned in and pressed his forehead against hers. Then he sank his teeth into the junction between her neck and shoulder. It wasn't a kiss. It was a bite. Pain, sharp and electric, shot through Isla's body. But following the pain was a rush of power she had never felt before. She was dormant. She had never felt the wolf spirit. But suddenly, she could feel his. It was a raging forest fire, a storm of ancient, raw power flooding into her empty veins. She screamed, arching her back. Kalen groaned, drinking in her dormant energy, using her untouched vitality to fuel his own healing. But then, something went wrong. Instead of the connection snapping shut once he was stable, it clicked. A sound like a lock turning in the center of the universe. Kalen pulled back abruptly, his eyes wide, his chest heaving. The wound on his side was steaming, knitting itself back together. But he wasn't looking at the wound. He was looking at Isla with absolute horror and awe. He reached up, touching the fresh, glowing bite mark on her neck. That, Kalen whispered, his voice shaking. That wasn't supposed to happen. Isla touched the mark. It pulsed in time with Kalen's heart. Not hers. What did you do? She whispered. I meant to borrow a cup of sugar, Kalen said, leaning his head back against the seat, closing his eyes. I think I just accidentally mortgaged the house. I just soul-bound you, Isla. Isla stared at him. You what? You're not just my savior anymore. He opened one eye, the gold burning brighter than ever. You're my mate. The silence in the cab of the stolen delivery truck was heavier than the humid Seattle air outside. Take it back, Isla said, her voice trembling. She pressed her hand over the bite mark on her neck. It wasn't bleeding anymore, but it hummed with a strange, rhythmic heat, like a second pulse. Whatever you did, undo it. Kalen leaned his head back against the seat, his eyes closed. The ghostly pallor was leaving his skin, replaced by a flush of color. But he looked exhausted. You can't return a soul, Isla. It's not a pair of shoes. I am dormant, she argued, panic rising in her chest. I don't have a wolf. I can't be a mate. Biology doesn't work that way. It does when you're desperate and shove 1,000 volts of alpha energy into a void, Kalen muttered. He opened his eyes, and the golden glow had settled into a deep, burning amber. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time, not as a savior, but as something integral to his existence. You were an empty vessel. My wolf needed a harbor. He docked the ship. Now we're tied. So what? We're married? Worse, Kalen grimaced, shifting in his seat. He winced, and simultaneously, a sharp phantom pain shot through Isla's ribs. Isla gasped, doubling over. Ow! What was that? That, Kalen said grimly, is the bond. I have a broken rib from the auction house. Now that we're connected, you feel the echo of my pain. That is incredibly unfair, Isla wheezed. It works both ways, he said, his voice dropping. If you get hurt, I'll lose my mind. It's a biological imperative. Which means, unfortunately, keeping you alive is now my #1 priority." He sat up, ignoring his own pain, and hers, and put the truck back in gear. "We can't stay here. Vane has trackers on his vehicles. We need to ditch this truck and go on foot." They drove 3 more miles into the industrial district, abandoning the truck behind a derelict textile factory. The rain had turned into a torrential downpour, which was good. It washed away scents. They walked for an hour in the shadows of the city. Isla was shivering, her soaked hoodie clinging to her frame. Every time she shivered, Kalen would tense up, his alpha instincts screaming at him to warm her. But he kept his distance. He was dangerous right now. The drugs were fading, and the wolf was close to the surface, confused by the new bond and the lingering rage of his captivity. They arrived at a rusted chain-link fence surrounding a salvage yard. The sign read, "Grady's Auto and Scrap." "Who lives here?" Isla asked, her teeth chattering. "Grady, an old bear shifter. He hates politics, hates the council, and owes me a favor," Kalen said. He approached the gate and rattled it in a specific pattern. A moment later, a floodlight snapped on, blinding them. A shotgun barrel poked through a gap in the fence. "Give me one reason not to turn you into a rug, Wolf," a gruff voice called out. "Because you still owe me for that time in Vegas, Grady," Kalen called back, "and I have a civilian with me." The gate creaked open. Grady was a mountain of a man with a grey beard and grease-stained overalls. He lowered the shotgun when he saw the state of Kalen. "Hell, Blackwood," Grady spat, ushering them inside a cluttered office that smelled of motor oil and stale coffee. "You look like you went 12 rounds with a thresher." "Something like that," Kalen grunted, collapsing onto a leather sofa that had seen better decades. Isla stood by the door, dripping wet, feeling out of place. This was the underbelly of the supernatural world, the gritty reality that the glossy magazines didn't show. Grady looked at Isla, then at the fresh, angry bite mark on her neck. He let out a low whistle. "You didn't tell me you picked up a hitchhiker, and you claimed her? A human?" "She's dormant," Kalen corrected, closing his eyes. And it was a tactical error. "My name is Isla," she said firmly, stepping forward into the light. "And I'm the one who paid his bail. So, technically, he's my hitchhiker." Grady laughed, a booming sound. "I like her. She's got grit." He tossed a rag toward her. "Dry off, girl. I'll get the whiskey and the first aid kit. You two have about an hour before the scent trackers pick up your trail, rain or no rain." While Grady went to the back room, Kalen beckoned Isla over. "Come here." "I'm fine standing." "Isla," he growled, the command vibrating in her chest. "Come here. The bond needs proximity. You're shivering, and it's making my wolf pace in my head." She walked over hesitantly. Kalen reached out and grabbed her hand. His skin was fever hot. The moment skin touched skin, a wave of warmth rushed through her, settling the chill in her bones. It was terrifyingly seductive. "We need to talk about the plan," Kalen said, his voice low. "Vane is just the middleman. Someone put me in that auction. Someone powerful enough to incapacitate an alpha and transport him without the council noticing." "You said you were betrayed," Isla whispered. "I was." Kalen's eyes darkened. "I was investigating a shipment. Drugs, something new called red haze. It suppresses shifter abilities, makes alphas weak. I tracked it to a warehouse at the docks. I went in with my second, a wolf named Rian." Isla felt a spike of betrayal through the bond, sharp, acrid, like tasting a battery. "Rian turned on you?" "He didn't just turn," Kalen said, his jaw tightening. "He put the collar on me. He watched them drug me. He looked me in the eye and said, It's just business, Kalen. Evolution requires sacrifice. So Ryan is running your pack now? Presumably, which means I can't go home. If I step foot on Obsidian Ridge territory, I'll be executed as a rogue. So what do we do? Isla asked. We have $80 left in my pocket, no car, and half the city hunting us. Kalen looked at her, his thumb tracing the back of her hand. The touch was distracting her from the hopelessness of their situation. We don't run, Kalen said, a cruel smile touching his lips. We hunt. You want to know about your brother? You want to know about the tattoo? Idler nodded. The geometric wolf isn't just a design, Kalen revealed. It's a brand. It marks the test subjects for Red Haze. If your brother had that tattoo, he wasn't just missing Isla. He was a lab rat. Isla felt the blood drain from her face. The room spun. And the only place they keep those records, Kalen continued, is the penthouse of the Orion Tower, the personal office of the man who bankrolled the operation. Who? Sterling was the judge, Kalen corrected himself, shaking his head, as if clearing a fog. No. The man is Victor Hale, a billionaire pharmaceutical mogul, and tomorrow night he's hosting a gala. You want to crash a gala? Isla asked incredulously. Look at us. We look like we live in a sewer. We don't crash it, Kalen said, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous plan. We walk in the front door. Because legally, I'm still the alpha of Obsidian Ridge until the council officially strips my title. And as my mate, you're essentially royalty. Fake royalty, Isla muttered. Fake it till you make it, Kalen said. Or until we burn the building down, whichever comes first. The plan was madness. It was suicide wrapped in a tuxedo. But Isla didn't have a better idea, and the burning need to find out what happened to Toby was stronger than her fear. They spent the night in Grady's salvage yard office. It was a restless night. The bond wouldn't let them sleep apart. If Isla moved more than 5 feet away, a physical ache would start in her chest, pulling her back toward Kalen like gravity. They ended up sleeping on the narrow leather sofa, Isla curled up against Kalen's chest. It was intimate, confusing, and infuriating. Every time he breathed, she felt it. Every time he dreamed, flashes of violence, running through forests, the smell of pine. She saw it. She woke up with a start at dawn. Kalen was already awake, watching the security monitors Grady had set up. He's here, Kalen said softly. Who? My contact. I called in a marker. A black sedan rolled into the salvage yard. Out stepped a woman with sharp features, platinum blonde hair cut into a bob, and a suit that cost more than Isla's entire life. Cassandra. Kalen nodded as she entered the office. You look expensive. And you look like trash, Kalen, Cassandra replied, her voice cool. She was a witch, a high society fixer who dealt in information and favors. She looked at Isla, her eyes narrowing on the bite mark. And you've been busy. A mate? Really? Now? Accident, Kalen grunted. Did you bring what I asked for? Cassandra placed a garment bag and a briefcase on the desk. 2 identities. Clean. Invitations to Victor Hale's Future of Medicine Gala tonight. And she pulled out a small vial of blue liquid. This. What is that? Isla asked. Masking agent, Cassandra explained. It hides your scent. Kalen reeks of alpha pheromones and you smell like him now. If you walk into that gala, Ryan will smell you from the lobby. This will make you both smell like beta wolves. Unremarkable. Boring. Perfect, Kalen said, taking the vial. There's a catch, Cassandra warned. It blocks the bond, too, for about 4 hours. You won't feel each other. You won't be able to share pain or strength. If you get hurt, Kalen, You're on your own. And if he goes feral," she looked at Isla, "you can't calm him down." Kalen looked at Isla. "We can handle it." Isla wasn't so sure. The bond was overwhelming, but it was also a safety net. Without it, she was just a human girl standing next to a monster. The Orion Tower was a glass needle piercing the Seattle skyline. The gala was on the 40th floor. Isla stepped out of the elevator, her hand gripping Kalen's arm. Cassandra had worked a miracle. Isla was wearing a floor-length dress of midnight blue silk that hid her thrift store sneakers. Comfort was non-negotiable. Kalen wore a tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, hiding the bandages on his chest. The masking agent worked. Isla felt quiet. The constant hum of Kalen in the back of her mind was gone. It was lonely. "Stay close," Kalen whispered, his voice low in her ear. "Smile. Don't look at the security guards." The ballroom was filled with the same people who had been at the auction, but here, under the crystal chandeliers, they pretended to be civilized. "There," Kalen nodded toward a man holding court near the champagne fountain. Victor Hale. He was an older man, silver-haired, with a benevolent smile that didn't quite mask the shark-like intensity of his eyes. He was talking to a younger man. Isla's breath caught. The younger man was Ryan. He was handsome in a traditional way, blonde and blue-eyed, laughing at something Hale said. He wore the Obsidian Ridge Pack pin on his lapel, the pin that belonged to Kalen. "Easy," Isla whispered, feeling Kalen's arm turn to stone under her hand. "If you kill him now, we never find the records." "He's wearing my father's cufflinks," Kalen growled, a low rumble that fortunately was drowned out by the string quartet. "Focus, Kalen." The office. They moved through the crowd. Kalen played the part perfectly, nodding to people who vaguely recognized him, but couldn't quite place him with the marhawked scent. They slipped past the catering staff and into the hallway leading to the private elevators. "Keycard?" Isla asked. Kalen revealed a cloned card Cassandra had provided. He swiped it. The elevator opened. They rode up to the penthouse level in silence. The tension was suffocating. Without the bond, Isla couldn't tell what Kalen was feeling, but she could see the sweat beading on his forehead. The silver poisoning was still in his system, and he was pushing his body too hard. The elevator dinged. They stepped into a massive office, lined with bookshelves. One wall was entirely glass, overlooking the city. "Start searching," Kalen ordered, moving to the computer on the desk. "Look for physical files. Anything marked Project Chimera or Red Haze." Isla frantically began pulling books off shelves, checking for safes. She opened a filing cabinet. Nothing but tax records. "Kalen, I can't find—" "Got it," Kalen said, typing furiously. "Encrypted, but yes. Here. Test subject lists." Isla ran to the desk, looking over his shoulder at the screen. Lists of names scrolled by. Most were crossed out, with the word terminated. "There," Isla pointed, her finger trembling. "Subject 104. Toby Corvin. Status: active. Transfer to Facility B." "He's alive!" Isla sobbed, a hand flying to her mouth. "Active, he's alive, Kalen." "Facility B," Kalen frowned. "That's the old ironworks in the district. It's supposed to be condemned." Suddenly, the lights in the office turned red. A siren began to wail. "Access denied," the computer voice droned. They knew, Kalen realized. It was a honeypot. The elevator doors pinged open behind them. "I have to say," a smooth voice filled the room. Victor Hale stood there, flanked by 4 armed guards, and Ryan. "I didn't expect you to be quite this stupid, Kalen. Coming back to the scene of the crime?" Ryan stepped forward, a smirk on his face. "And you brought a pet. How quaint." Kalen stepped in front of Isla, his growl vibrating through the floor. "She's not a pet, Ryan. She's the woman who owns your debt." "Get them," Hale ordered, bored. Kalen didn't shift. He couldn't, not fully, not with the silver still weakening him. But he moved with lethal precision. He grabbed the heavy brass lamp from the desk and hurled it, taking down the first guard. "Run, Isla! The stairwell!" Kalen shouted, tackling Ryan. The two wolves crashed through a glass display case. Isla hesitated. She saw Kalen land a punch that cracked Ryan's jaw, but Ryan was fresh and strong. He kneed Kalen in the injured ribs. Kalen went down, gasping. One of the guards aimed his gun at Kalen's head. Isla didn't think. She didn't have a wolf. She didn't have claws. But she had the heavy, metal file drawer she had pulled out earlier. She screamed, lifting the drawer with adrenaline-fueled strength, and smashed it into the back of the gunman's knees. The guard buckled. The gun went off, shattering the window. Kalen used the distraction to sweep Ryan's legs, then lunged for the guard, snapping his neck in a blur of motion. He grabbed Isla's hand. "Go, now!" They sprinted for the stairwell door as bullets chewed up the mahogany desk behind them. They burst into the concrete stairwell, Kalen slamming the heavy fire door shut and jamming a chair under the handle. 40 floors down, Kalen panted, blood dripping from his nose. "Can you make it?" "Do I have a choice?" Isla asked, kicking off her heels. She was barefoot now. "Let's move." But as they started to run down the stairs, Isla felt it. The masking agent was wearing off. The bond slammed back into place like a freight train. And this time, it brought something new. It wasn't just pain. It was hunger. Kalen stumbled, gripping the railing. His eyes turned entirely black. The proximity to Ryan, the violence, and the fading drugs had triggered the shift he had been holding back. "Isla," he choked out, backing away from her. "Get away from me." "What? No! We have to go." "My wolf," he gasped, his bones cracking audibly as his shape began to distort. "He's taking over, and he's feral. He doesn't recognize you yet. To him, you're just meat." Isla stood frozen on the landing of the 39th floor. Above them, men were banging on the door. Below them was freedom. In front of her was the man she had saved, currently transforming into a 7-foot-tall monster that wanted to kill her. "Kalen!" she shouted, stepping toward him instead of away. "Look at me!" He roared, a sound that shook the walls. Claws erupted from his fingers, shredding his tuxedo. He swiped at the air, missing her face by an inch. Isla didn't flinch. She grabbed his face with both hands, ignoring the terrifying growl rumbling in his chest. "I bought you," she whispered fiercely, staring into the black void of his eyes. "I own you, and I say we are leaving this building together. Heal, Alpha." For a second, time stopped. The monster froze. The command, spoken with the absolute authority of a woman who had bet everything, cut through the madness. The black receded, leaving just the golden amber. Kalen blinked, human again, sweating and shaking. He looked at her with a mix of terror and worship. "You are," he wheezed, "absolutely terrifying." "Come on," Isla said, grabbing his hand. "We have a brother to save." They didn't stop running until the lights of the city were a smear of neon in the rearview mirror of a car they'd borrowed from the hotel valet stand. Kalen drove with a terrifying focus, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, while Isla sat in the passenger seat, trying to stop her hands from shaking. They ended up at a motel off Route 99, a place called the Sleepy Pine, where the receptionist sat behind bulletproof glass and didn't ask for ID. Inside room 12, the adrenaline finally crashed. Kalen locked the door, dragged the heavy dresser in front of it, and then collapsed onto the edge of the bed. He stripped off his ruined tuxedo jacket, his shirt clinging to him with sweat and blood. "Let me see," Isla said, her voice quiet. I heal, Kalen grunted, but he didn't push her away when she reached for the hem of his shirt. Not with silver in your system, you don't. She peeled the fabric away. The bruises from the auction were turning a sickly yellow-black, and the fresh cuts from the glass at the tower were angry red. But it was the bite mark on his neck, where the collar had sat, that looked the worst. It was infected, pulsing with a dark heat. Isla grabbed the first aid kit they'd swiped from Grady's. She uncapped a bottle of rubbing alcohol. "This is going to hurt. Do it." She poured the liquid over his wounds. Kalen hissed, his back arching, muscles roping tight under his skin. Through the bond, Isla felt a white-hot flash of agony that made her gasp, her own knees buckling. She grabbed the bedside table to steady herself. Kalen reached out, gripping her hip to steady her. "Block it out, Isla. Visualize a wall. If you feel everything I feel, we won't survive the night." "I don't know how," she whispered, her fingers trembling as she dabbed at his cuts. "I've been dormant my whole life. I don't know the rules." "There are no rules for this," Kalen said, his amber eyes locking onto hers. The intensity in them was suffocating. "I've never heard of a bond like this. It's constant. It's loud." He leaned into her hand, closing his eyes. "And it's the only thing keeping the wolf from tearing this room apart." The air in the room shifted. It became heavy, charged with static. They were exhausted, dirty, and hunted, but the pull between them was undeniable. It wasn't just magic. It was the raw, biological need of two creatures who had saved each other's lives. Kalen's hand moved from her hip to the small of her back, pulling her closer between his spread knees. Isla's breath hitched. She could smell him, cedar, rain, and the metallic tang of blood. It was intoxicating. "Isla," he murmured, his voice rough. "If we go into that facility tomorrow, I can't promise I can protect you. If Ryan is there, if Hale has more of that serum, I might lose control again. I don't need you to protect me," Isla said, her voice surprisingly steady. She ran her thumb over the geometric tattoo on his shoulder, the same one her brother had. "I need you to help me burn it down." Kalen stared at her for a long moment, then let out a breath that was half laugh, half groan. "God, you are trouble." He pulled her down. It wasn't gentle. It was a collision. His lips crashed onto hers, hungry and desperate. Isla kissed him back with equal force, her hands tangling in his dark hair. The bond flared, sending waves of pleasure and heat crashing through both of them, blurring the lines of where he ended, and she began. For a few hours, in that dingy motel room, they weren't a fugitive alpha and a broke girl. They were just a storm. Morning came too soon, grey and relentless. They sat on the floor, eating stale donuts from a vending machine, staring at a map Kalen had drawn on the back of a pizza box. "Facility B," Kalen pointed to a spot in the industrial wasteland south of the city. "It used to be the Black River Iron Works. My father shut it down 20 years ago because of toxic runoff. It's isolated, defensible, perfect for illegal experimentation." "And Toby is there," Isla said, clutching her cold coffee. The file said, "Transfer complete." "If he is," Kalen said carefully, "he might not be the brother you remember. Red haze, it changes things. It strips away the humanity. It leaves only the instinct to kill." "We'll fix him," Isla said, though her stomach churned. "If they made it, there has to be an antidote." "We need backup," Kalen said. "We can't take a fortress with 2 people." "Grady?" "Grady is good for a getaway, not a siege." Kalen shook his head. He pulled a burner phone from his pocket. "There's one other person, someone Ryan thinks is dead." He dialed a number. "Who?" Isla asked. "Bastian, my former beta. Ryan staged a coup, told the pack Bastian died in the initial attack. but Bastian is too stubborn to die." Kalen spoke into the phone for less than a minute. When he hung up, he looked grim. "He's in, and he's bringing the few enforcers who remained loyal. They've been hiding in the Cascades. They'll meet us at the perimeter at sunset." The day was an agonizing wait. They prepped their gear, which consisted mostly of items scavenged from a hardware store. Kalen fashioned crude spears from rebar. Isla filled glass bottles with bleach and ammonia. "Chemical warfare?" Kalen raised an eyebrow. "I was a janitor," Isla shrugged, taping the bottles. "You learn things. Don't breathe it in." At dusk, they drove to the outskirts of the ironworks. The facility was a looming skeleton of rusted metal and broken glass, surrounded by a high-tech electric fence that hummed ominously in the silence. Shadows detached themselves from the tree line. 4 men and 2 women, dressed in dark camo, moved toward them. The leader, a man with a scar running through his left eyebrow, embraced Kalen. "Alpha," Bastian said, his voice thick with emotion. "We thought you were gone." "Not yet," Kalen clasped his arm. "Bastian, this is Isla. She's the reason I'm standing here." Bastian looked at Isla, then at the mark on her neck. His eyes widened, but he bowed his head respectfully. "Luna." Isla flinched at the title. "Just Isla, please." "Status?" Kalen asked, shifting into command mode. "Perimeter is heavily guarded," Bastian reported. "Thermal cameras, motion sensors, and something else. We hear howling from inside, but it doesn't sound right. It sounds broken." "Subject wolves," Kalen said, his jaw tightening. "They've been dosing them." "What's the plan?" "We hit the power grid first," Kalen pointed to a substation. "Cut the lights. Isla and I go in through the old drainage tunnels. You and the team hit the front gate, draw their fire, create chaos." "A distraction," Bastian nodded grimly. "We can do that." "If we don't come out in an hour," Kalen said, his voice hard, "burn the place to the ground, with us inside." "Kalen," Isla protested. "No loose ends, Isla," he said softly, touching her cheek. "If Hale has created an army of mindless killers, they cannot leave this valley." The drainage tunnel smelled of rot and ancient oil. Isla crawled behind Kalen, the knees of her jeans soaked in muck. The bond was a tight wire between them, transmitting Kalen's hyper-alertness. She could feel him mapping the darkness, hearing heartbeats she couldn't hear. "Above us," he whispered. He pushed up a heavy grate. They emerged into a maintenance closet inside the main factory floor. Through the crack in the door, they saw the nightmare. The factory floor had been converted into a high-tech lab. Rows of glass cages lined the walls. Inside them were wolves, or things that used to be wolves. They were emaciated, their fur patchy, their eyes glowing with a chemically induced crimson light. Tubes ran from the cages into a central mixing tank filled with a glowing red liquid. "God," Isla breathed, clamping a hand over her mouth. "They're harvesting them," Kalen realized, his rage spiking so hot it burned Isla's mind. "They're draining their essence to make the serum." "Toby," Isla whispered. She scanned the cages. "I have to find him." Suddenly, the alarms blared. The lights cut out, plunging the factory into darkness, followed immediately by the strobing red of emergency lights. Bastian had hit the grid. "Go!" Kalen kicked the door open. Chaos erupted. Explosions rocked the front of the building as Bastian's team engaged the guards. Inside, scientists in white coats scrambled, dropping clipboards. Kalen was a blur of violence. He didn't shift fully, fighting in a hybrid form. Claws out, teeth lengthened, moving faster than humanly possible. He tore through the security guards like they were paper. Isla ran down the rows of cages, checking the clipboards attached to the glass. Subject 89. Subject 92. "Isla, behind you!" Kalen roared. Isla ducked just as a tranquilizer dart whizzed past her ear. She turned to see Ryan standing on the catwalk above, a rifle in his hands. "You are persistent!" Ryan shouted over the din. He looked manic, his eyes dilated. "But you're too late! The batch is finished!" Ryan pulled a lever on the catwalk. The locks on the cages clicked open. "No!" Kalen screamed. 30 red-eyed feral wolves burst from their cells. They didn't look at Ryan. They looked at the closest source of fresh meat, Kalen and Isla. "Get to the office," Kalen shouted, throwing a guard into the path of a leaping wolf. "Find the control override." Isla sprinted toward the glass-walled control room overlooking the floor. A wolf, mangy and foaming at the mouth, lunged at her. Isla didn't stop. She smashed one of her chemical bottles against the wall next to its head. The explosion of ammonia fumes stunned the beast, causing it to whimper and claw at its nose. She scrambled up the metal stairs. Inside the control room, she slammed the door and locked it. She scanned the consoles. "Think, Isla. Think." She found a microphone. She turned it on. "Kalen!" she screamed over the PA system. "The fire suppression system. It's chemical. Halon gas. If I trigger it, it'll knock out the oxygen. Do it!" Kalen's voice came from the floor below. He was surrounded. 3 feral wolves were tearing at him. He was fighting them off, but he was losing. He wouldn't hurt them. They were victims, and that hesitation was killing him. Isla's hand hovered over the button, but then she saw him. In the corner of the factory floor, standing still amidst the chaos, was a boy. He wasn't shifting. He was just standing there, staring blankly at the violence. He wore a hospital gown, and on his shoulder was a geometric wolf tattoo. "Toby!" Isla screamed, pressing her face to the glass. Ryan, seeing Isla in the control room, laughed. He raised a remote control. "Say goodbye to your boyfriend, Isla." He pressed a button. On the floor, the feral wolves suddenly stopped attacking Kalen. They turned in unison, their red eyes locking onto him. They began to vibrate, their bodies swelling. "They're rigged," Kalen realized, looking at the collars on the wolves. "They're bombs, living bombs." "Evolution requires sacrifice," Ryan yelled. Kalen looked up at the control room. He looked at Isla. Through the bond, she felt a wave of pure, heart-breaking love. And then, a goodbye. No, Isla thought. Absolutely not. She didn't hit the fire suppression button. She hit the button marked Overload, Audio Frequency. It was a riot control measure she'd read about in the manual at the council offices. She cranked the dial to maximum. A high-pitched, ultrasonic shriek blasted through the factory speakers. It was a frequency designed to incapacitate shifters. Every wolf in the room, Kalen, Ryan, the feral subjects, collapsed instantly, clutching their ears, screaming in agony. The sound was so intense it shattered the glass of the cages. Isla, being human, or dormant, felt only a dull ache. She grabbed a fire axe from the wall of the control room. She kicked the door open and ran down the stairs. The room was a writhing sea of incapacitated wolves. Ryan was on his knees on the catwalk, bleeding from his ears, unable to focus. Isla didn't go to Kalen first. She ran to Rian. He looked up at her, dazed. "You stupid human." Isla didn't speak. She swung the back of the axe, connecting solidly with Ryan's temple. He crumpled, unconscious. She grabbed the remote from his hand and smashed it into pieces on the metal railing. Then she ran to Kalen. He was curled on the floor, groaning. She dragged him toward the loading bay doors. "Get up," she grunted, pulling his massive weight. "Get up, Alpha. We have to get Toby." She ran to her brother. Toby was on the ground, hands over his ears. He looked at her, his eyes unfocused. "Toby!" she cried, grabbing his face. "Isla!" He rasped, his voice sounding unused. "Why is it so loud? Come on." She practically carried Toby to the loading bay. Kalen stumbled after them, shaking off the effects of the sonic blast. They burst out into the cool night air, just as Bastion's team breached the inner doors. "Clear the building!" Kalen roared, his voice returning. "Get the subjects out, now!" Isla collapsed on the grass, holding her brother. Toby was thin, pale and traumatized, but he was alive. Kalen stood over them, panting, watching his team drag the unconscious Rian and the confused test subjects out of the factory. He looked down at Isla. The bond settled, no longer screaming danger, but humming with a deep, resonant exhaustion. "You," Kalen said, dropping to his knees beside her, "are the most dangerous creature I have ever met." Isla laughed, a breathless, hysterical sound. She reached out and took his hand. "I told you, I didn't buy a pet." But the victory was short-lived. From the shadows of the tree line, a slow clap echoed. Victor Hale stepped out. He wasn't alone. He was surrounded by a dozen men in high-tech tactical armor that hummed with energy. "Bravo," Hale said, smiling. "A marvelous field test. The sonic vulnerability is noted. We'll patch that in the next version." He pointed a finger at Toby. "But I'm afraid that unit is proprietary property, and I want it back." Kalen stood up, placing himself between Hale and Isla. He was battered, bleeding, and exhausted. But he was an alpha on his feet. "Come and take him," Kalen snarled. Hale sighed. "Kill the wolf. Keep the girl. She seems compatible." The soldiers raised their weapons. "Fire!" Hale commanded. But before the soldiers could squeeze their triggers, Isla squeezed Kalen's hand. She didn't pull power this time. She pushed it. She realized then that being dormant didn't mean she was empty. It meant she was a dam. Her reserves were untouched, a lifetime of energy waiting for a spark. She flooded the bond with pure, white-hot determination. Kalen gasped as the surge hit him. His eyes flared a blinding electric gold. He didn't shift. He didn't need to. He unleashed a true alpha roar, a sound not of this earth, a command so ancient and absolute it bypassed the soldiers' high-tech armor and struck their primal brains. Submission. The soldiers collapsed, paralyzed by an instinctual terror deeper than training. The tech armor sparked and failed, overloaded by the sonic density of the roar. Victor Hale stood frozen, his arrogance shattered by the crushing weight of a king's presence. Bastion's team swarmed from the shadows, disarming the paralyzed soldiers in seconds. Hale was tackled to the ground, screaming about lawsuits as silver cuffs clicked onto his wrists. It was over. 3 months later, the Velvet Room was nothing but ash and bad memories. Obsidian Ridge had its alpha back, and the Council had a terrifying new set of rules dictated by Isla Corvin. Toby was healing in the pack clinic, the red haze slowly fading from his eyes. On the balcony of the Alpha's private cabin, overlooking the misty pines, Kalen handed Isla a small velvet box. She opened it. Inside wasn't a diamond, but the crumpled, blood-stained receipt from the auction house. "You spent your life savings on a monster," Kalen murmured, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her flush against his chest. "I intend to spend the rest of my life paying you back. With interest." Isla smiled, leaning back into him, the bond humming contentedly between them. No longer a jagged tether, but a golden thread of steel. "No refunds, Alpha," she whispered. He kissed her, deep and claiming. "None accepted." And that is the story of how Isla Corvin bought a beast and found a king. If this story gave you chills, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Did you expect that twist with the dormant power? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new romance drama. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.